Let's get started with our first AI phone caller, and for that, we're going to use Bland.ai. If you're not familiar with Bland, we did a workshop on it introducing the tool and its capabilities. In these lessons, we're going to dive deeper into how we can make more functional voice callers that make more sense for clients, and how we can have more control over the conversation. We'll get into how we can set up appointment setting, answering questions, asking qualifying questions, all within the voice caller. So to get started, we're on the Bland page. We're just going to want to go ahead and hit sign up. Then from here, it's going to ask you to put in a first name, last name, email, and phone number. So we'll just go ahead and type that in. Then after that's all typed in, just hit sign up. Then you're going to get a text code on your phone. Then once you're all signed up, you'll be greeted by this interface. You can see that we're greeted by some cards. We're able to send a phone call, send bulk calls via uploading a CSV or a JSON file. We can buy phone numbers for a company to receive inbound calls. We can set up our own voices and do some voice cloning. And then we can purchase credits. So Bland operates off call credits. So what you'd want to do is go ahead and hit this purchase credits button. And then from here, you could purchase some credits. And then if you wanted to, you could go into your settings, billing details, and you could set up auto recharge so it adds $5 or whatever amount you set anytime it runs out. Now, the main feature that we're going to be working with is conversational pathways. This is where we have a designer similar to VoiceFlow, and we can design the conversation that the AI should take and how it should respond. So what we're going to do is head over to conversational pathways. Then from here, you'll see get started. Now, in the previous courses, what we do is we teach you step by step, starting from the start block of how everything works and how to build your own flow. What we're actually going to do for this to ease you into Bland.ai is actually duplicate one of their templates and then walk you through how that's built and what each step does. So what you want to do is click this restaurant reservation and then hit duplicate template. Then from here, you can just call it anything you want. I'm just going to call it restaurant lessons demo. And then you could give it a description and then you could duplicate the pathway. Then you'll be greeted by the conversation designer. And this is where we can control the logic of how the AI speaks and different actions that we can do. So what this does is it's just a restaurant reservation inbound caller, and it can help customers that call schedule their reservation. I'm going to start breaking it down in the next lessons, but let's just test a call so you can understand how this sounds. So I'm just going to go to the top right and hit the send call button. If you want to test with your own phone number, you would just click use my phone number. Then for the start node, just hit the one labeled start. Then we can scroll down and just hit send call. So now I'm receiving a call. I'm going to go ahead and answer it and put it on speaker.
Hey there, this is not Bland Bistro reservation line. Do you want to make a reservation?
Yes, I do.
Can you please tell me what date you're looking to make the reservation for?
I'd like to make it for tomorrow, Thursday, September 5th.
What time would you like to make the reservation for?
Are you guys open at 10 p.m.?
No, we are not open at 10 p.m. Our hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Do you have any other questions?
That's all. I guess I can do 4 p.m. I have 3 people with me.
Please give me a moment as I check our bookings. I've made the reservation for 4 p.m. on Thursday, September 5th for 3 guests. We look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye.
All right, so you could hear what that was doing, and you could hear while the conversation was happening, these different nodes were lighting up, and I'll explain more about that in the next lesson. All right, so let's jump into the basics of Bland's conversational pathways. To do this, I'm going to go through each node in this template and explain what it does. So in any conversational pathway, we have the start node, and you can see it has the flag that says default. So if you double click it, you'll be brought into the node editor. So if you click the drop down, you can see we have the different type of nodes. We're going to be covering the most useful ones in further lessons, but just know that each node serves its own function. Here we can write the name of the node. If I were to write begin in the name and then I go all the way down and hit save, you can see this node is now called begin. I'm just going to change this back to start. Then we have the option for static text, or actually to give AI instructions. So now with the default node, we have the option to use AI to respond. So for instance, when this AI agent called us in the previous lesson, you could hear that it greeted us with, "Hey there, this is not Bland Bistro reservation line. Do you want to make a reservation?" So every time the call started, it says this exact line. Now, if we wanted, we could turn the static text off, and then we could give it a prompt. We could say, greet the user and welcome them to Bland, not Bistro. Ask them if they want a reservation. So now, if I were to save this and then have it call me, and I answer, hello?
Hello, welcome to Bland Not Bistro. How can I help you? Would you like to make a reservation?
You can see it didn't say the exact line that it was saying before, and it took a bit of time, and that's because it's using AI to craft a response based on how we've instructed it in this prompt box. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and switch this back to static text and go with, hey, this is Bland Not Bistro. Would you like to make a reservation? Next, we have a loop condition. Now, I'm not going to cover what this is within this node because we're not using it. Same with the global node. I'll mention these later down the line. Then we have advanced options. So since this is the more advanced section of the courses, you should have been through demo builds, you should have been through AI outreach, and you should understand what the temperature is in an AI model. So that's the same thing that we can set here. Closer to 1 is more creative, closer to 0 is more deterministic, and it has more predictable responses. Then we can also select the model type. We have the option of a higher speed model, a balanced in speed and intelligence model, a higher speed with decent intelligence model, and then the higher intelligence model. Now, for something like a simple prompt like we had earlier, which is just a greeting, you would want to put something like a higher speed model. You really only want to enable higher intelligence models when it has to make an intelligent decision about a response, which is what I'll touch on in another lesson. Then we have the dynamic interruption threshold. So if you just enable this, we can set a threshold. Now again, you should have been through the AI phone caller workshop where we show a simple demo of Bland, and this is just that same value. The lower this is, the more immediate the AI will respond and not wait for pauses in the user's statements, so it might interrupt more. As you can see here, this will update the interruption threshold from this node onwards. Then we have the option to skip a user's response, so if we enable this, the conversation would start at this node and immediately go to the next one, not waiting for a user's response. I'm just going to go ahead and disable this as there's not really a use case here. Then we could also block interruptions. So if the AI is speaking and I were to try to speak over her while she's speaking, right now the AI would stop, it would get interrupted. If you turned this on, the AI would never let the human interrupt and it would just continue to speak and finish its sentence. This is something you want to play with and test for yourself to see how you like the conversation to be carried out. Then we have the option to extract call info into variables. This is a more advanced feature, so I'll cover this a little bit more down the line. Same with fine-tuning examples. But just quickly to mention fine-tuning examples, this is what I want you to think of as few-shot prompting. Whenever we try to train an AI in the courses, we use a few examples of Q&A, and this is where you could add that here. If you found that your AI is kind of messing up on a certain type of response and you wanted to program in and give it some examples of how it should respond. We're just going to ignore unit tests, and that covers the default node, specifically at the start flag. Next, I want you to notice on each path between nodes, there's this little card that has a label. If we were to go and click this little pencil to edit it, you can see that this is a description of when this pathway should be chosen. So for here, it says user responded. So when a user responds, this pathway should be taken. Below, we have a description where we can provide more information and describe when this pathway should be chosen. As you can see here, it's optional, but gives the agent more context about when to choose this pathway. I just want you to note, with any time you're adding more prompts or more computational thinking that the AI has to do, it will cause the responses to take longer. Then we have advanced settings where we could compare a variable with something that the AI captured. Don't worry about this now. Again, I'll get more into those concepts later. Okay, so we've started at the start node, we've moved down this path that confirms that the user's responded, and now we're at ask for reservation info. If we just go ahead and go into the editor, you can see that we're not using static text, we're now prompting the AI. We're saying ask for the date, time, and number of guests. Ask each question one at a time. And this is important to note because if we didn't have this last sentence here, the AI would just ask this all in one sentence. But as you observed in the original call, it asked me for each of these things one at a time, which can make for a better user experience. It makes things feel more natural. Then we're now utilizing the loop condition. So as you can see, this describes the condition for when the agent should move to the next node, or loop inside of this node. If the condition that we write here is not met, the agent is going to stay on this node until the condition is met. This makes sure that the agent has the information it needs to move on, because for this use case, we need to know these three things for us to actually make a reservation and put it into some CRM or database. So this is going to make sure the agent actually collects that information before moving on to the rest of the conversation without actually knowing this stuff. If I just drop down in advanced options, you can see we're doing a higher intelligence model. So let's just back out of this. Next, we have the path going 2 places. First, we have the number of guests. So this is saying if the number of guests is less than 8, then we're going to go to this path on the left. And then for this one on the right, if the number of guests is more than 8, then we're going to take this route. Now what this is doing, if the number of guests is more than 8, we're going to use a transfer call node. So this is the first specialized type of node I'm going to introduce you to. What this does is it will then transfer this call to whatever phone number we put in here. When we reach this node, we can tell the AI to say one last sentence before we transfer the call. You can see here, the prompting is tell the user you will be transferring them to our agent to handle your requests. So this is just saying if I were on phone with the AI and I said, hey, I have 9 people, the agent's gonna then tell me, okay, no problem, I'm transferring you, just hold on a moment. So this one is pretty simple for this example. We literally just have this one prompt and then we give the phone number that we want to transfer to. With these specialized nodes, this is where we can really expand the functionality of these things. You could have a bunch of different departments that you're transferring calls to for certain use cases, and this is where we can really start to control how the conversation is going. On the other hand, if the number of guests is less than 8, we're using a webhook step. Now, before we move on to other specialized nodes, like the webhook, I just want to give you a more full understanding of how this is working. So the AI is getting on a call. Everything that we say and everything that the AI says is in a transcript. And whenever the AI is saying something new, it has memory of that whole transcript so it can adjust the conversation accordingly. So for example, at the start, if I said my name was Cam, the AI would be able to recall that my name is Cam down at a different block. And that leads me to another point. You might be wondering why in this ask for reservation info, we don't have extract call info into variables, and that's because of that conversational transcript. So what extract call info into variables does is it runs dialogue extraction before the next node dialogue. So this means that it's going to listen for different variables that we want the AI to pay attention to, and it'll save that information in those variables so we can access them later, and so we make sure the AI has that information on call. So for example, if for some reason the AI was struggling to remember the date, time, and number of people, I could force it to save that in this node by adding a variable name. For instance, I could say date. For the type, I would say a string. This is just the data type of the actual variable we're saving. Don't get too confused. String is just for words, integer is for numbers, boolean is just for true or false. Then we would give a description to the variable. You can see an example is extract the user's email address from the conversation. We would write extract the desired date of reservation from the conversation. And this would make sure that while the AI is talking before it moves on to the next node dialogue, it captures the exact date that I would want for a reservation in a variable called date. As you can see, this will lead to higher latency, but allows variables to be used in next node's dialogue. So again, why I'm mentioning this is because we don't necessarily always need to use this. The AI has that conversational transcript, so a lot of the times if it's a short conversation, that conversational transcript is good enough and we don't actually have to extract the call info into variables. Now, if you're building an agent that has longer conversations and needs to remember things, it's more complex, then this is a good option you'd want to use. Just for demonstration purposes, you would also write number of people. You would say extract the number of people needed for reservation. And for this, you would select integer because it's a number, for instance, 8 people. Now I'm just going to turn this off because again, we don't need this for this example, but now you understand more about what this function does and how this conversation is working. In the next lesson, we'll jump into an overview of the webhook and how this greatly expands the functionality of the agent. Alright, so let's jump into the webhook. Now from the demo builds and from the workshops, you should be familiar with webhooks. So we're just going to run through this node and how it works in the context of Bland. So like I mentioned earlier, we have the extract call info into variables. So if I just click this drop down, you can see the 3 variables that we're collecting. And an important thing I want you to note, this gets run before the webhook is called. As you can see, this extracts the information from the call into variables and uses them in our webhook parameters. So in my opinion, it makes more sense like Bland set it up here, where you extract the call info into the variables inside the webhook step rather than setting it previously. This is because this is going to look at the entire conversation and then fill in these variables before it calls the webhook, versus before, if you're having a big conversation, maybe you say a date and time, it saves those variables, and then you say, actually, I want a different date and time, and then things change and things can get messed up, it can get confused. So personally, I think it's a better idea to extract them right here, as it will just look at the whole transcript and set the variables before this webhook gets sent. Then we have the webhook itself. You can see it's an API call where we're posting information to a webhook. Again, you should be familiar with what webhooks are from workshops like the dynamic carousels and the webhook workshop. So as you can see, like normal, we have the method, which is post, get, patch, put, or delete. For the webhook, we're going to leave it at post. Then we have the URL we want to post the webhook to. This is just a default one that Bland set up as an example. It's not actually hooked up to anything right now. Then we have our body. And as always, this is in JSON. So you should be familiar with the JSON format. We have date, colon, and then the date variable. So this is the format that this is getting saved in. As you can see up here, date and date. Then we have time, and then guests, number of people. Now, something important I want to mention. So I explained the data types before, string, integer, and boolean, but you want to make sure that you have this data formatted exactly as it needs to be for the webhook. So for example, make is specifying that, hey, it needs to be in this exact format when it's saving the date into the date variable. So it's going to output in month, date, year, and not something like September 5th in Word format. Same thing for the time. It's telling us, hey, we need this time in 24-hour format, for example, 1330. And this is important because if you're sending this information to a webhook and that webhook is expecting data in this kind of format, then that's what you're going to want to give it. So then below, we have a timeout. If if the webhook doesn't complete in this amount of seconds, then the webhook will time out and we'll move on. We have the option to test our API request. Again, I'm just going through this template showing you what these different nodes do. We'll get into building our own system where we test all this stuff along the way. Then we can enable response data. Okay, so next up we have the webhook response. So when we send this information to a webhook, of course we have the option to get a webhook response where we actually receive data back, which is what we want. So what Bland has set this up with is reservation success. So whether or not the reservation was successful, if we found a time and we could place the customer successfully with that reservation, ideally we would configure the webhook to be true or false. Then it also gives us some available slots. So just in case this was false, there wasn't any room at that specific date and time, we could have other available slots to propose an alternative to the customer, and then we could go about this that way. You can see here, we have the room for additional context and description. So underneath, we've just said, this is the available slots for the date provided. Then we have the pathway after API response. This is directing which path this is going to take depending on these variables. So for here we have two pathways and we could add more if we wanted, but they're both based on the reservation success. So we have reservation success equals, you can see we have a whole bunch of other operations here, true. Then we're going to go to the node that's labeled reservation successful. Then for our second path, we have reservation success equals false. Then we'll go to the path that says find new time slot. So if I just quickly back out of this node, you can see that we have find new time slot and reservation successful. So that's the two paths that this could go. Then back in the node, we have the option to send speech during webhook. And this is super useful in terms of keeping the conversation flowing and eliminating dead space. So what this does is while the webhook is processing in the background, of course that can take a bit of time, this will say some type of speech while that's happening. So here it's just set to say, please give me a moment as I check our bookings. So this is good to kind of, like I said, break up that dead space. So there's some conversation while the webhook is processing. Then we have some advanced option like always. This is where we can set the intelligence model. And for this, for webhooks, for the most part, you want to choose higher intelligence as this computationally takes some more power. So we'll just back out of that. Now I'll just quickly explain these paths. So if reservation success equals true, we're going to go to this reservation successful node. You can see we have a new special node, and this is the end call function, which is self-explanatory. It's going to end the call. We give it a prompt. It says, tell the user you have made the reservation for the given date and time and the number of guests. You look forward to seeing them and then say goodbye. So you encountered that on the call. It told me, hey, your reservation was successful. Goodbye. Nothing too fancy about this. It's literally just ending the call based on the success that we had placing them in a reservation. Then we have this other path, which is a bit more nuanced. You can see this is the path where we haven't successfully placed them with a reservation. And so what this does is goes to this find new time slot card. And if you recall that I mentioned a second ago, in the webhook response, we get the available slots variable, which the AI will be able to see during the conversation. So in the find new time slot, we're telling the AI to tell the user that there are no more slots for the given date and time, give alternatives for the user, given the available slots you have in your conversation history. So again, this has the available time slots that we got from the API request. Then we're extracting call info into variables. This is just updating the time that they want to give the AI a bit more accurate information. Since we've already set a time variable, we want it to get overridden so it can find a new slot for them. So at this point, the user would say, okay, do you have this time available? And the AI then has two options. One of them is the case that the user gives a time slot that's not part of the available time slots from the variable that the AI received from the webhook response. So in that case, it's going to just loop back to this find new time slot. And if it does have that time slot, it's just going to go back to this reserve card to make a reservation from this webhook. And that is the main functionality of this calling agent. It's these three blocks here. These are the most important. This is what finds availability for reservations and sets them. In the next lesson, we'll jump into this knowledge base block up here and our global prompts before we get into some more advanced AI callers. So we've covered how the conversation flows throughout these nodes. Now, another question you may have is, what if a customer deviates from the flow of conversation? What if they have questions? How does the AI answer that? Well, in Bland, we have access to a knowledge base node. You can see that it's yellow. This means that it's global. Think of this like an intent step from voice flow. Anywhere in the conversation, this node will be listening, and if it gets triggered, it can visit this node and pull information. So in the node editor, you can see its knowledge base. We can give it a name as always, and then we have a prompt. We say, answer any questions that the user may have regarding the restaurant by referring to the knowledge base you have. Answer the question in one line, and then ask if they have any more questions. So this is just instructions of what should happen if we reach this knowledge base node. Then we have the knowledge base itself. Now, as of right now, we can only give the knowledge base in text. We can't really do PDFs or other file formats that you might be used to from other AI tools. We have a limit of up to 30,000 characters, and this is where we can give information about the call, about our company, or any information we want the AI to have access to be able to answer questions. So if I were to just go ahead and add We are an Italian cuisine restaurant. The types of food available are as follows. Let's say chicken parmesan, spaghetti bolognese, chicken soup, and Caesar salad. Now the AI has access to the type of food that this restaurant offers. If we go down, you can see the global node is enabled, and then we have instructions for the global node pathway. Whenever you have a global node, think of it of having invisible lines connecting to it. So this is specifying the condition in which we would reach the global node. You can see for the instructions, the default ones are user has a question about the restaurant's hours or location. I'm just going to add hours, location, or food. Then we could provide an additional description, but I'm just going to leave this blank since we don't have too much instructions needed for the length of information we have in the knowledge base. Then we have the toggle for automatically go back to a previous node. So after this knowledge base node is visited and the AI produces an answer, it's going to go back to the previous node we were at. We also have the option to redirect to another node, but what you should know is that this ignores the prompt written in this node. So this is going to actually ignore this and just forward to a different node that can then go ahead and respond. We have a drop down here to choose the node that we want to direct it to. I'm just going to turn this off as it doesn't really make sense for this use case. Then I recommend using the higher intelligence model for knowledge-based queries. And if we wanted, we could give some fine-tuning examples. So for instance, we could try a dialogue example. What kinds of food do you have? We have, and then I'll just go ahead and copy and paste this. And then we could save. Now if I go ahead and send this call, I'm going to receive it on my phone.
Hey, this is Bland.ai. Would you like to make a reservation?
I'm actually curious, what type of restaurant are you guys?
We are an Italian cuisine restaurant. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, what kind of food can I eat there?
We have chicken parmesan, spaghetti bolognese, chicken soup, Caesar salad. Do you have any more questions?
No, that's all.
Can I help you with a reservation? May I ask what date you're looking to dine with us?
So you can see that visually on the screen it's jumping between the nodes. And of course, the response is a little bit iffy there. We would want to fine tune this and how it responds and the flow of the conversation. But that's just an example of how this knowledge-based node can be used. Now, the last thing we're going to touch on for this specific template is the global prompt. So how Bland.ai usually works without the global prompt, which you should be familiar with from the Bland.ai workshop, it would just take a big set of instructions and carry out the whole phone call based on those. This is the global prompt. I want you to think of this kind of like a system prompt. Of course, if you've been through the previous courses, which you should have, you'll understand what a system prompt is. We're just telling the overall AI conversation, this is a phone call, do not use exclamation marks. Convert 24-hour format timings to 12-hour format. For example, 14 should be written as 2 p.m. Now, this is just ensuring that, for example, in the API call, we wanted to send it as 24-hour format, but we don't want it to be spoken as 24-hour format. So this is just a system prompt telling the AI that whenever it's saying a time, make sure it's saying it in 12-hour format. We also get a little bit of a score for our prompt. We have the option to compress our prompt, but that's just an introduction to the global prompt. And now we are all set. You now understand the basics of Bland.ai conversational pathways, and we can dive into getting into some more advanced applications, setting up actual webhooks to make.com, checking calendar availability, booking appointments, etc. Alright, so now that we've covered the base functionality of Bland.ai, let's jump into creating the actual functionality of the agents, like integrating with make.com for checking calendar availability and the actual scheduling of appointments. So here I am in Bland Conversational Pathways. What we want to do is hit Create Pathway. Then from here, we'll say Use Case. Now, as you can see, we can enter a description of the conversation that we want to create. This can include key actions and responses. We'll describe specific scenarios, such as handling a reservation call, customer support interaction, or any specific situation where the AI needs to guide the user through a series of steps. So what we're going to actually do is use ChatGPT to help us come up with this kind of scenario. We're going to tell ChatGPT what we want and then have it give the actual instructions for us to paste into here. All right, so what I've written in ChatGPT is I'm using Bland.ai conversational pathways to build an AI phone agent. They have a feature where I can describe what the agent should do and it will build the pathway for me. Please create a detailed description for a dental office AI phone receptionist that checks availability via a webhook and is able to cancel, reschedule, and schedule appointments. Attached are instructions for Bland. So what I've done is just taken a screenshot of these instructions, given it to ChatGPT 4.0 so it can then use GPT Vision to analyze those instructions and factor those into the response it's about to give me. So let's quickly review these instructions. It gives us a use case. It says dental office AI phone receptionist. An overview: the AI phone receptionist will handle common tasks for dental office, including checking availability for appointments, scheduling new appointments, rescheduling existing appointments, and canceling appointments. Gives us some key actions and responses. It's going to tell us how to start our conversational pathway by greeting and identifying the caller's need, checking the availability via a webhook, handling appointment confirmation and reminders, inquiring about services or other information, and then ending the call. Now, if you just want to pause this, you can take a look more in depth at these instructions, but what I'm just going to do is copy and paste these instructions directly into Bland.ai's text box here, and then hit generate. You can see now we get a loading screen, and it's going to slowly load our pathway, and the pathways are just built off JSON. So what this is doing is using AI to take our instructions and then generate the JSON for the actual pathway. The key here is that we're taking a basic prompt, giving it to ChatGPT to give us a much more detailed and structured instructions for Bland.ai, which takes a lot of the thinking off our shoulders and is usually much more specific than what we might come up with. And then when it's done, it's going to automatically populate a pathway for us. You can see this gives us the general flow, which I'm going to break down in the next lesson. So now that we have our pathway, let's break it down so we can understand what Bland has created for us and start to plan how we can modify this for our final use case. So here we have the start node, greet the caller in a friendly manner and ask how you can assist them today. We probably want to prompt this to say, greet the caller from whatever company name, and then ask them how you can assist them. Now for the example I'm just showing you guys, it's always going to be booking an appointment, but of course these are edge cases that you could handle. So from here, we have a bunch of different pathways. You can see if the user wants to cancel an appointment, we have this pathway that leads to existing appointment details. You can see that the description is if the caller wants to cancel an existing appointment. Now let's check this out. For the prompt, we have ask the caller for their name, existing appointment date, and time to locate their appointment. So what we'd want to do is actually extract some of this info into some variables that we'd then be able to send in a webhook. We'd also want to set up a loop condition so that we don't move on until the caller gives their name, existing appointment date, and the time that they'd like to relocate. Then we have a path that says if the caller provided details to cancel an existing appointment, we'd then move on to confirm the cancellation. And the prompt is to confirm the appointment details with the caller and that they want to cancel this appointment. This is just reiterating over the details that the caller just gave us. So then we can move on to actually rescheduling the appointment. And let me just quickly break down the logic of how we're going to be moving forward. So anytime that we have to check availability, we're going to be doing that directly within the call. But anytime that we actually need to reschedule the appointment, we're going to be doing that in post by sending the entire transcript to make.com and then having AI analyze it to decide whether or not we're going to reschedule, cancel, book an appointment, etc. And that's because when you're doing it on the call, it can lead to issues. If a user reschedules an appointment, we successfully reschedule it, and then they say, wait, actually I wanted it for a different time. That can cause issues with the AI. So we actually want to do the actual scheduling, canceling, rescheduling in the post of the call. We only want to make sure that we can actually schedule them for that appointment during the call. So we'd have to reflect that in a webhook, which I'm going to show you in the coming lessons. Then we go and we follow this path. It says if the caller confirms they want to cancel the appointment, then we'd go to this node that says confirm that the appointment has been successfully canceled, ask if they'd like to schedule a new one. If they want to schedule a new one, we'd go to this new appointment date block. If they don't, then we would go and end the call. Now let me just continue to inspect this. Off of this first node, if the user wants to schedule a new appointment, we would also head to this new appointment date, and this is where we ask the caller for their preferred date and time for the new appointment. We would then head to checking the availability, and Bland didn't automatically create the webhook node for us, but you can see it says use the webhook. So what we want to do is actually change this node to a webhook, which we're going to do in the coming lessons. This branch is then if the caller provides a preferred date and time, as you can see. If we find availability, then we'd go and confirm the appointment. Then this next one, it looks a bit tricky, but what it's doing is once it hits the confirm appointment node, if the user does not confirm it, it actually leads back to this new appointment date, so we can start that process again. Then Bland gives us a couple of edge cases, so the caller inquires about services offered. Then we're going to come down to this services overview, and this is where we'd want to have a knowledge base card. We also have a path to check if the user wants more detailed services. We can send service details. This is where we can set up some functionality to maybe email or text the caller with the services, and then all of these will lead to the end call. Now we're going to end up tweaking this and modifying it as we go on, but the main purpose of these lessons is to actually set up the webhooks and then set up all the scheduling, and then everything else can be modified to your use case. Just looking at this now, what we'd actually want to do, since this is going to be a webhook, we're going to want to go down two different paths. Number one is if that date is available, then we go to confirm appointment. If it's not, we'd want to loop back and make sure that we find them an appointment date. If not, we'd actually want to go to a new card that says find a new slot, and then keep that looping until we find a date that actually works for them. Now that we kind of broke down this pathway, let's move forward in the next lesson where I'm going to have you set up cal.com, which is a great tool to easily allow us to check our calendar availability via webhook. So we'll set all that up in the next lesson. Now let's get set up with cal.com. To get here, you will literally just type in cal.com, and then from here we can hit sign up. Then it's going to ask us to create a username. I just wrote in despite TRW. Then we enter in our email. Then we can add a password. From here, we can go ahead and create an account. Then it's going to send us a verification email. So just head to your inbox and verify. Once you click the verification in your email, you can go ahead and enter your name. Set your time zone and then hit next step. It gives us a whole bunch of options of calendars that we can connect. This is super useful because rather than having to check a bunch of different calendars and their availabilities, we can sync up all of our calendars and then just check directly with the API. I'm just going to go ahead and connect Google Calendar. Then we can choose our Google account. Then we're going to have to select what cal.com can access. I'm just going to hit select all, then continue. And you can see our Google Calendar is linked. From here, we can hit continue. We can connect Google Meet, Zoom Video, Discord, and a bunch of other options. I'm going to go ahead with Google Meet. Then we hit next step. We set our availability. So this is whatever your standard operational hours would be when people would have the availability to actually book an appointment. Cal.com will provide a booking link similar to Calendly. So this is where that is reflected. I'm just going to leave this as standard and hit next step. We can add a profile or an about. I'm just going to skip this and hit finish. So for here, we get a bunch of different event types. I'm just going to create a new one for our demo purposes. Hit new. Call this lessons demo, duration, say 60 minutes, and then hit continue. From here, we have a bunch of other functionality, but we'll just leave this how it is. See, we have availability, limits, advanced, apps, workflows, webhooks. We can do a bunch of different things with cal.com. I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. If we wanted to preview, we could click this little preview button, and then this is what it looks like. You can see it's similar to what Calendly would look like. Now, what I'm actually going to do is just go ahead and copy this link to an event. I'm going to open this up on a new email so we can create a bunch of pseudo appointments that we can then use to check for our availability demo. So I've just booked one here. And I'm just going to repeat this step a couple different times to give us some variation on a couple different days. So now if I head back to my Google account, go to my Google Calendar, you can see I now have these appointments in the calendar, and this is what we're going to be checking with cal.com. Let's jump into the next lesson where we're going to look at the API documentation and set up a quick HTTP request to be able to check the availability in make.com. Alright, so let's get into the cal.com API documentation. To find it, I just looked up cal.com API and then clicked API reference. Now they have an API v1 and API v2. We're going to be using v1. You don't really need to worry too much about this now, but you can look into it yourself if you want to explore more of the possibilities of the v2. So if you just come down to API reference v1, we can now look at all of the different requests that we can do. What we want to go to is the slots request, and this is basically going to return all of the available slots for a given start and end date. So if I just expand upon this, you can see it's a GET request. This is the API that we have to call. Then we have a bunch of query parameters that we want to add to the actual URL when we are requesting it. So you can see we have to add our API key. We have to add a start time and end time. We can also add an event type ID. Anything with a star you have to add. Anything else is optional. You can see this is what an example response looks like. We have our available slots for this specific day with the different times for that day. So what we're going to do is actually just set up this request in make.com. Usually when doing these types of things, you want to work backwards. So we want to make sure we can actually find our available slots with an API request. From there, we can work backwards with sending information from Bland.ai and then setting up the rest of the automation to get that information back in Bland and using AI and all that good stuff. So here I am in a brand new scenario in make.com. I'm going to go to HTTP, make a request. From here, we're already in a GET method, which we can see is what we need. Then we're going to copy this URL, paste it in, and then we need to add the query parameters. So let's start grabbing some of these. The first thing I'm going to add is the event type ID. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. Now, after the first query parameter, we're going to add a question mark just when we're starting the sequence of query parameters. Then I'm going to paste in the event type ID. Then I'm going to say equals. And to get our event type ID, we're going to head to cal.com, click on our actual event type that we just set up, and then grab the event type ID, which is this number right after event types. I'm going to go ahead and paste this, and then we're going to add the rest of the query parameters. So after each one, you're just going to add an ampersand. We can go back. What else do we need? Okay, we need a start time and an end time. So I'm going to copy start time, paste it here, make sure there's no space after start time, hit equals, and then we set our date. As you can see in the example request, the date follows this format, year, month, day. So we're going to do that exact same thing. I'm going to write 2024. 09 for September, and then 26, because that's when we scheduled some appointments, so we can double check that this availability is working. Then we're going to add another ampersand, put in end time, equals, and then we're going to write 2024, 09, 27. Now I know I'm writing 27, but this is literally just going to grab the dates from the 26th. If we put both of these as 26th, nothing's going to come back. That's just the way their API works. So it's going to do from the start of the 26th, and the end time is the 27th. So it's just grabbing everything on the 26th. Then we're going to add a time zone. So we'll write time zone. As you can see, that is how it's written here. And I'm in the America, New York time zone. So that's what I'm going to write. It's America. And then don't worry about %2f. If you just look this up, you can see that it is a / And since we have forward slashes here, we want to be able to distinguish. So we're adding this forward slash in this formatting to make sure that it's only a part of this query parameter. So we have America / new _ York. Then we want to add our API key. Let's go back, copy API key, paste it here, hit equals. Then we actually need to get our API key. So back in Cal, we'll hit settings, API keys, and then create your first API key. I'm just going to call this lessons demo. We can set how long we want it to until it expires. I'll just put 3 months. Then we can hit save. Then from here, we can go ahead and copy our API key, hit done, head back into make.com, and go ahead and paste it. Now, if everything's good, we should be able to run this module, and we'll get back slots for our available times. As you can see, we got status code 200, which means it's good. We got a response back. We have our slots for 2024, September 26th, and it gives us all of the available times. So what I'm going to do to make sure that this is a more readable format is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to say, output the following in a more readable format, EST time. Then I'm just going to go ahead and paste the slots. Now from here, you can see that we don't have the time slot 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. available. And if I just go back into my calendar, you can see that's because at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. we have those times booked. So what we're going to be able to do is give this request to AI, forward this back to Bland and say, hey, these times are not available. And then Bland will be able to conversate and we'll be able to do things based off of that. Okay, now that we're in Bland and we have the base conversational pathway set up, we need to start setting up our integrations to be able to actually check the availability of a calendar. So what we're going to do is head down to this check availability node, which is still set to default, and we need to configure our webhook. So we'll just double click into the node and then change the node type to webhook. Now from here, I'm going to leave this extraction prompt to the default one. Then we need to go ahead and add some variables. So just click add variable. And then what we're going to be sending to our webhook is the date and time that the person wants to schedule the appointment. So similar to the restaurant template, we're going to write in date. We're going to write the type, which will be a string, and then we're going to give it a description. So I just wrote desired date of appointment in this format because that's the format that we need for cal.com. Then we need to add a time variable. So we're just going to write in time, select the type as string, and then I just copied the exact description that we had from the restaurant example. Desired time of reservation in 24-hour format, e.g. 13:30. And I'm just going to change reservation to appointment. Next, we need to configure the webhook tab. So we'll just open this up. We need to create our webhook within make.com. So here I'm in that same find availability scenario. I'm just going to add a new webhook, a custom webhook, bring the trigger over here, add a new webhook. I'll call this dental assistant find availability and then hit save. From here, we can copy the address to clipboard. Then we can head back into Bland, paste in the webhook URL, change this to a post request, add some headers, which you can see I already had one added. I put the standard content type and then application JSON. And then we need to enable the body. For this, what you can do is head back to the restaurant demo, access this webhook, and then copy and paste this payload from the restaurant webhook. Delete everything in here, paste it, and then we just need to remove the guest. So I'm just going to delete this, delete the extra space, and then make sure we delete this last comma. Then what we can do is test this API request. We just hit test. You can see that now we've successfully determined the data structure. We can hit OK, and if we wanted to run this module, we could send another test request, and you can see we get the date and the time. Now, right now, it's sent over as the exact format that we've written down, but of course, when we're having a conversation with the AI, it's going to convert this to the format that we need. It's going to end up doing something like 2024, 09, 27, and the time would be something like 14. And then if we run this quickly, test this request, you can see that we get the date and the time. So let me just quickly change these back to date and time. And then what we need to do is add a pathway after the API response. We're going to end up changing this in a little bit, but for now, we'll just do upon API request completion. We'll select the appointment confirmation node and then hit save. So you can see after this check availability node, we'll head down this path to appointment confirmation. Now what we're going to want to do next is add some response data. But before we actually do this, let's create our make scenario because Bland has a feature that easily allows us to set up these response data variables. So we'll jump into that in the next lesson. So now that we have our webhook set up, let's create the rest of our scenario. So what we want to do is get the desired date and time to book the appointment. We want to use AI to take that date and time range, add another 72 hours after that to be able to return back to the Bland.ai caller. So in case that appointment is not successfully booked, we can return back other available slots for the AI to look at. So let's just go ahead and add an OpenAI module. we're going to choose create a completion. From here, I'm going to select GPT-4o mini. Then we can add our system prompt. I'm just going to go ahead and paste in a system prompt that I've already created, and then I'll walk you through it. So what I have is your job is to take a date and time and output a date time range of 72 hours within the specified date and time for an appointment booking. Output the format in year, month, and day. Output only the listed dates in JSON format. Do not wrap the JSON in any other text, not even backticks. Then we can set a token limit. I'm going to set it to 128. And then we can do something pretty neat to not have to parse the JSON afterwards. What we can do is go into the advanced settings. First of all, I'm going to lower this temperature to around 0.2 because we don't need creative responses. We want it to stick to the instructions pretty closely. Then I'm going to head down to the response format, and instead of text, I'm going to hit JSON object. Then I'm going to hit parse JSON response. Then I'll hit OK. So if I go ahead and right click on this module and hit run this module only, you can see that for a result, we have the start date and the end date, which is 3 days later, and it's already parsed so we can access these variables in a make.com friendly way. Now from here, we want to slot in our HTTP make a request to check the availability. We'll just click in here, and where it says start time, of course we had a fixed date for our testing, but we're just going to want to go ahead and delete this and then choose the start date from the OpenAI module, then do the same for the end time, delete this, and add the end date. Now this will always make a request to find the availability for the time that the user wants to book. Now I'm just going to quickly rename these modules so it's a bit easier to understand. I call this one date range and this one find available slots. Now, instead of trying to programmatically set up a JSON structure, let's just use another very cheap GPT-4o mini step to make this a bit easier for us, because what we want to do is take all of these available slots and the desired date and time and return whether or not the reservation was successful and the rest of the available time slots for that specific range that we just created with the AI. So we're going to add another completion module. I'm just going to right click on this and hit clone. From here, we can connect this right at the end. Of course, we want to modify the system prompt. So again, I have a pre-made one and I'll just break it down. Just a quick note, I am going to provide the blueprint below this lesson, so you can just import the blueprint and you'll have all of this system prompt and everything that you need, because I do have an example JSON structure below. So what I have is your job is to take a desired date and time for an appointment booking and available time slots and determine whether the time is available to be booked. You will return a JSON structure with a variable called reservation success and the other available time slots. The reservation success variable should be true or false to indicate whether the desired reservation date and time is available for booking. Now, you can see I'm using reservation instead of appointment booking just because sometimes it's a bit easier to say in one word, but the AI is going to understand it in the same way. They're pretty interchangeable terms. Now, because we created our event to be 1 hour, I say each event for booking is 1 hour, so analyze the available time slots and determine if there is an opening for the desired booking. Then I have an example JSON structure, so you can see we have reservation success, false as an example, and then an array with the available time slots. So we have as an example October 1st, October 2nd, and October 3rd with the different times that are available. Then lastly, again, I have output only the listed dates in JSON format. Do not wrap the JSON in any other text, not even backticks. And then for the max tokens, we want to increase this a bit as these outputs will be a bit longer. So I wrote 1024. Then again, we have our temperature pretty low and we are outputting as another JSON object while parsing the response. So we need to add one last message, which will be the user message. And we actually need to do this for both modules. So I'll loop back quickly right after this and add it. So we just add role, user, I'll write in desired date and then choose the date from the webhook, desired time, and then the time, and then the available slots. And for this, we'll choose the data because that's what contains these slots. Hit OK, then let's loop back to this module and again add our user message. And for this, we're just going to write date, select the date, and then time, and then select the time. Now, if I quickly go ahead and run this module, and then back in Bland, I send another test request with some hard-coded input data. I can hit test API request. Then these modules are going to start running. You can see here, the output for this OpenAI one is the date range. Then we have our available slots with the dynamically inserted start and end date. And then finally, with this output module, we can click the result and we can see it's a JSON structure. So reservation success is false, meaning that time slot was not available. We get our result with the reservation, and then we get an array with available slots. I just quickly tested with the date of October 1st because of course we set our availability up in cal.com to not be on weekends, so I just reflected that date so we had some more information and data to play with. And right now I have this model on GPT-4o mini. It does work fine, but I'm actually going to switch it to 4o as it is a bit more intelligent and can handle these kind of scenarios more accurately. So in the next lesson, we'll jump into actually creating the webhook response and getting this information back into Bland. Great, now let's set up our webhook response. So we're just going to go ahead and add another webhook and then a webhook response module. And then for the body, we want to select the result from our reserved and available slots module, which you can see I have renamed. Now when we hit run and we head back into Bland, You can see I have a new date hard-coded. When we actually test our API request, as you can see, it's running through the scenario. We get an API response in Bland, and then we can just click this little plus button to add the response variables that we need to capture. So I can just go ahead and then click this plus button here. You can see reservation success and the variable path has been added. And then I can do the same with available slots. And again, that's reflected down here. Now we don't have to add the individual times because of the data structure. We are adding available slots, which is higher than all of these. So it's automatically going to contain all of these times. From here, we can hit save. All right, and now that we have the webhook all set up, we need to set up some paths based on our success of our reservation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit add new node, and this is going to be a default node. And then I want to name this node find new time slots. Then for the instructions, I'm going to say, tell the user that there are no more slots for that given date and time. Give alternatives to the user, given the available slots you have in your conversation history. This is good for now for testing purposes. Then what we want to do is go back into the webhook variable, pathway after API response, and we want to set a condition for our variable. So if reservation success equals true, then we want to go to the appointment confirmation. We'll add another pathway. And if reservation success equals false, then we want to go ahead and head to find new time slots. Then we'll hit save. And then just as a quick check, similar to what we did in the restaurant template, we want to loop this back to find new time slots. And the condition will be user gives time slot not in available time slots. Then we'll hit save. This is just for the case that the user picks something else that also isn't available in the time slots. We kind of go through this loop until they find something that is available. And then from here, we can just lead this to appointment confirmation. And then for the label, we have user has selected an available time slot, and I'll just add the same thing for the description. And then lastly, before testing, I'm going to go ahead and then switch these variables back to date and time. And so now we can test. What's neat in Bland is that we have this test pathway feature, which allows us to basically test it just by typing in a little widget. I'm just going to select the start node so we can test the whole thing from front to back. Then we can hit test pathway. So the AI greets us, says, hello, thank you for calling. How can I assist you? I'm just going to say looking for an appointment. Then it says, what date and time would you prefer for the appointment? I'm going to say October 1st at 2 p.m. Then it says, let me check the availability. You can see we're now at the check availability step. Our webhook is running. If we inspect our code on the right, you can see in pathway info, we have our webhook response, which says reservation success true, available slots, and then it lists out all of the available slots. So because that variable was true, it says that it's scheduled our appointment for October 1st at 2 p.m. and it's happy to send us a confirmation of the appointment via email or SMS, which of course we could build out later. But you can see that this is correctly getting all of the times and it's able to take our input, send that information to make.com so we can check the availability of our calendar. Now what we're going to end up doing is sending this entire transcript after the call is ended over to make.com with some AI to analyze when the actual time was scheduled for so we can book the appointment. So now what I'm doing is I head to my calendar and then I added an example time for the booking on October 1st at 2 p.m. So now we can test this for when we ask for a time that's not available. So again, I'm going to test the pathway, say looking for an appointment. I'm going to say October 1st at 2 p.m. So as you can see, we have, I apologize, but it seems that the 2 p.m. slot on October 1st is no longer available. However, we do have other time slots available on that day. Would you be interested in 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 p.m., etc.? So if we go into our debugging here on the right and we look at the pathway info, you can see that the reservation success was false because we did just book that slot and we have all of the other available times. So if I were to go ahead and say, do you have anything on the 2nd, because we do have information about October 2nd, as you can see here, and then hit send. Because there's this loop, it's now going to tell me, yes, we do have availability on October 2nd. The available time slots are 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and etc. So as you can see, this feature is working. If I were to go ahead and say, okay, book me for 10 a.m., it's going to say your appointment has been scheduled for October 2nd at 10 a.m., and then it moves on to the appointment confirmation node. So another important thing that I added is in the global prompt, I said the current time is now UTC, which is one of Bland's native variables that gets the current date and time in UTC, and then -4 hours for EST time because that's my time zone. And if you just go to test a pathway, you can see the current variables are now UTC. It says Saturday, 28th of September, 2024, and it gets the time. Awesome. So now we're all set up to check our calendar availability. Next, we'll be moving forward into creating a make.com scenario to actually schedule appointments in our calendar. Okay, now let's get into the actual booking of appointments. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate how the functionality works for scheduling new appointments, canceling appointments, and rescheduling appointments. So right now, what I'm going to do is hit send call. And you can see in the webhook URL, I have the link to a custom webhook for the scenario that I've set up here. Now I'm going to show you how to build this whole scenario from scratch. Let me just demonstrate how each of these functions work. So I'm just going to go ahead and send the call. Here is my calendar. Now I'm receiving the call. Hello?
Thanks for calling Durham Smiles. How can I help you today?
Hi, I'd like to schedule an appointment for a teeth cleaning.
Before I check the schedule, can you tell me your name and what date and time would work best for you for the teeth cleaning appointment?
Yeah, my name is Cam Smith, and I'd like to come in on October 8th at 3 p.m. if that's available.
Let me just check the schedule real quick for October 8th at 3 p.m.
So you can see in here, I don't have anything on my calendar for October 8th.
I've checked the schedule, and it looks like 3 p.m. on October 8th is available. So your appointment for a teeth cleaning is scheduled for October 8th at 3 p.m. Can I get your email address to send you a confirmation?
Sure, it's cam.smith@example.com.
Just to make sure I got that right, can you confirm your email address for the confirmation? You said it was cam.smith@example.com, is that correct?
At example, so with the @ sign.
Thanks for calling Durham Smiles, and I appreciate you scheduling an appointment with us. Have a good evening.
And now you should see that the webhook is going to get triggered to book the appointment. And here we are, the webhook is processing, and we've gone all the way through our scenario to book the appointment. If I head into here, you can see we have a 3 p.m. teeth cleaning, Cam Smith, email@example.com. That's just something that I've hard-coded within the scenario. And that's how the booking of the appointment works. Now, let me try to get myself a call to reschedule the appointment.
Thanks for calling Durham Smiles. How can I help you today?
Yeah, I'd like to reschedule my appointment that I have on the 8th.
Before I can help you with rescheduling, can you please tell me your name and what time you have scheduled for the 8th?
Yeah, my name is Cam Smith, and I scheduled it for 3 p.m.
So just to confirm, Cam, you've got an appointment with us on the 8th at 3 p.m., is that correct?
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and check some alternative times for you on the 8th. What time of day works best for you, morning or afternoon?
Actually, can I do the 9th at 2 p.m.?
Let me check the availability for the 9th at 2 p.m. I'll just check on that for you real quick. I've checked the schedule, and it looks like 2 p.m. on the 9th is available. I've gone ahead and rescheduled your appointment for 2 p.m. on the 9th. Everything looks good on our end. Can I get your email address to send you a confirmation?
Sure, it's email@example.com.
Thanks for letting me know I've updated your information. I've also sent a confirmation email to email@example.com. Thanks for calling Durham Smiles. Have a great night.
Alright, so now if I head over to the scenario, this should get triggered in just a moment. And you can see we're following the change path. And if I head back, now my appointment at the 8th for 3 p.m. is canceled, and my appointment is all set for the 9th at 2 p.m. And it captured all of the information. We have a teeth cleaning and all of the other details that we want to provide. And now that you see how this is going to work, I don't need to test the cancel feature for you. It's just the same as rescheduling. Instead of updating our appointment, we're just going to be canceling it. So what I'm going to do is show you how to set up this make.com scenario, and this is going to be the foundational building blocks of our whole build. We'll be able to check availability, and we'll be able to schedule, reschedule, and cancel appointments. And then from there, we can move forward with improving our agent, making sure the conversation is right, and checking a lot of our edge cases to make sure this agent is as capable as possible. Let's jump into the next lesson where we'll start from building the scenario from scratch. All right, so the first step we need to do is set up a custom webhook as always. So we're just going to select custom webhook, create a webhook, name it. I'm going to say Lessons Dental Demo Beta. Since I already built this out, hit save. Now we can copy this address to clipboard, head back into Bland. And now back in Bland, what we can do when we go to hit send call, we can paste this in our webhook URL. Then we can test the webhook. And if I head back into make.com, you can see that we've successfully determined the data structure. I go ahead and run this again, head back to Bland, and then hit test webhook. We get the data structure that we should expect from Bland, the call ID, transcripts, and this is going to end up being expanded more, but this is okay for now. Now, rather than going back and forth and doing this iteratively, this is a lesson, so it's more planned out. So I'm just going to build these blocks exactly how I've already built them so we can streamline this process. So the next thing we want to do is we want to pass this to an AI module that's going to be able to analyze the entire call transcript and determine whether or not we want to cancel, reschedule, or book a new appointment. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and grab an OpenAI, create a completion module. I'm going to add ChatGPT 4.0. Then I'm going to do a system message. For the message content, I already built out the prompt, so let me just go over it. We have the role. You are a highly specialized call analysis system meticulously designed to categorize dental clinic call transcripts based on their intent and operational significance. Your primary function is to analyze each provided call transcript and classify it into one of the defined categories by following a structured process. Number 1, examine the dialogue, identify key phrases, topics, and contextual clues that reveal the purpose of the call. Number 2, determine actionable status, assess whether the call content requires immediate action, scheduling, or can be handled later. So this part where we said or can be handled later, what we can end up doing later in our flow is just capture any queries that aren't there to actually schedule an appointment, but are actually there for customer service, and then we just pipe that into an Airtable. So we save the person's name, record, what they were inquiring about, so the dental clinic could then access that and see any customer service inquiries. Then we have to assign the category. Based on your analysis, accurately classify the call into one of the following categories. We have new appointment scheduling, customer service request, reschedule appointment, irrelevant or marketing call, and then appointment cancellation. And then you can see it should output these different categories: new appointment, customer service, change, ignore, or cancel. Then we have a couple other specific instructions. You can pause the video really quick and read these if needed. Then we give it an example format, category, new appointment, and then do not include any text or characters outside of the JSON format in your output. Focus on the accuracy of categorization based on the dialogue's content and the specified categories, and then maintain neutrality and objectivity in analyzing the call transcripts, avoiding any assumptions or interpretations beyond information provided. Then what we need to do is add our user message. Our max tokens I'm going to set to 256. Then we can go into the advanced settings again, set the temperature low, as we don't need any creativity here. For the response format, we're going to select JSON object again, and then we're going to want to parse the JSON response. Now, we aren't able to access the actual transcript that we need, just because we've only sent a dummy webhook so far. So let's just go ahead and hit OK on this. Let's run this and then do an actual call and get the transcript over. Now, I already showed you what these calls are like in the last lesson, so I'm not going to show this in the lesson, but you'll see the call transcript data structure when this arrives. So I just finished the call, and now we have a more accurate data structure, and the variable that we're going to be using is this concatenated transcript. This basically just means the transcript all in one kind of text block. You can see what I said here. Hi, I'd like to schedule an appointment for next week on October 8th. Kind of like the same scenario we did in the last lessons. So what we need to do is for the user message, we need to add the concatenated transcript to the input. Now I'm just going to quickly rename this module, and I called it find intent. And now something that I recommend you do here is actually just copy the concatenated transcript to your clipboard. This way we don't have to do a call and send a webhook every time we want to test. We can actually just manually run each module. So if I right click this module, hit run this module only, and then I paste this in and I hit OK, we can see that the output is we have category new appointment, which is correct with the call that I just did. Now, of course, if you wanted to do some more extensive testing, which you should, then you would send some other webhooks where you say, hey, I want to cancel a call. Hey, I want to reschedule, and make sure that this module outputs the right thing. Now, I've already tested this, so we're going to move on to creating the rest of the scenario. All right, so now that we're able to accept the call transcript from Bland and decide the intent of the call, let's build out the rest of the flow where we set up the actual booking of appointments. So what we're going to do is add a router. And now what this router allows us to do is to do different things based on a path that we specify. So for example, when someone wants to book a new appointment, we're going to want to do something different than if someone wants to reschedule an appointment. So what I'm going to do is just set up the first filter, which I'm going to make the ignore filter. Now technically we don't have to label this, but it's good to just visualize and have there in case we needed to add anything or record any of the calls that we deemed that should be ignored. And when I mean record, I mean just put it in Airtable or something like that. So I'm going to write for the label, ignore. For the condition, I'm going to write the category equals ignore, then hit OK. Now we need to create our new appointment one. So I'm going to write new appointment if the category is new appointment. And notice this is where you can select different text operators. So we could say equal to, not equal to, contains, but for this, we're going to write equal to. All right, now what we need to do is get another OpenAI module to analyze the entire transcript and pull out the specific key details. If you recall me saying earlier, we're doing the scheduling appointments in post because then it allows us to lighten the load a lot on the Bland side of things. And we have a lot more control, allowing AI to say, hey, at first, maybe the person wanted to reschedule at 9, but towards the end of the call, they said they actually wanted to schedule it for 10. AI is going to be able to look at that whole transcript and decide that it actually wanted to be scheduled at 10. So what we're going to do is just add an OpenAI create a completion module. For this, I'm going to select GPT-4o, and then we're going to add our system prompt as always. And here's the one I created. You are a highly precise transcript analysis system designed to extract critical information from dental clinic call transcripts. Your task is to identify and extract specific details from each conversation. Task: your primary function is to analyze the call transcript and extract the following key pieces of information. Number 1, the agreed start date. This should identify the date and the time that the caller and the clinic agreed upon for an appointment or service in the format of month, day, year, hour, minute, and then AM or PM. Now, I'll show you why exactly I told the AI to output it in this specific format, and that's because that's one of the formats that Make.com expects for dates. Next, we need the caller's full name, the service they requested, so this could be something like a teeth cleaning or a regular checkup. Now, in Bland, you'd want to add some type of logics where if someone asks for an appointment, you say, awesome, do you need a teeth cleaning? Do you need a regular checkup? That sort of thing. Then we have any conversation notes, so this should highlight any concerns, questions, or additional notes mentioned by the caller during the call, including special requests or issues raised. And then the caller's email. And then I'll skip over these specific instructions. You can pause and read it if you wanted to. Then we give it example output format. So it'll have the start date in the format that we specified, the caller name, the service requested, conversation notes, and then the email. As always, this is a JSON payload. Then I say, if any field cannot be determined from the transcript, return it as null. For those of you that don't know or don't have any really programmatic experience, null just means empty. So we have the start date. If it's not provided, it would be null, which they should always be providing a start date. Then we have the caller name, service requested, conversation notes, and then email. Then finally, I give a full example of the output with the date and time formatting to ensure that AI is going to output in this exact format. Then we need to add a user message. We're going to add the transcript, which is the concatenated transcript variable. Then I'm going to say that the current date is now. And in Make.com, if you go to this tab over here, that looks like a calendar. Make.com has a now variable, which is the current date and time. And this helps because if someone's saying, I want to come in for October 8th, Make.com knows that it's 2024 because we're giving it the current date and time. These models were trained up to 2023. So if you don't provide the current date and time, it can choose the wrong year. And of course, in the call, we don't want to ask them for the year because that's a bit weird. Then for the max tokens, I'm setting 256. I'm going to go into advanced settings as always, lower the temperature to about 0.2. Then I'm going to make the response format a JSON object and then parse the JSON response as we did previously. Now I can just go ahead and test this. I'm just going to go ahead and paste the concatenated transcript that we copied earlier. But just a quick note, if you didn't copy that or you want to go back into your Make.com logs, what you could do is make sure your scenario is saved, hit the little back arrow, and then you could see the history. If you click the history tab, then in the diagram tab, kind of when you're backed out of being actually in the editor, you can go down in the history and you can click one of the histories and then see what was run. Here we have the webhooks module. So I can just go ahead and then look at all the variables. Of course, that was the first test run. So I'm going to go back to the one where we actually got the information. So that's going to be this one, concatenated transcript, and then we can just go ahead and copy and paste it again. All right, now we need to set everything up for rescheduling appointments. So what I'm going to do is just clone this module and then drag this to the router as you just saw. Then we need to set up the filter and I'm going to write change. And if the category equal to change, then we're going to follow this route. Again, this could say reschedule. It really just depends on what you say in the system prompt of the previous one. And you can see here that I had this as change. So now what we need to do is we need to find the current booking. So I modified the system prompt for this OpenAI module. Let me just quickly walk you through the changes. So now on top of everything else, we need to get the original appointment date. So this is the original appointment that the person wanted to change, and then the new requested appointment date. And now you can see down within the examples, this is reflected. Now I'm going to provide the blueprints to each of these scenarios so you can find the full system prompt within there. Then we need to go about actually finding that event. So I'm going to do another Google Calendar module, and then we're going to look for the search events module. Again, we select our calendar ID. And then what I like to do is we want to search by the start date. And as you can see, we can't access that result yet because we haven't run this module. All right, now that we need to find the start date, we need to actually run this module once first. There are ways to get around that. I'll teach you that in the future. So what I'm going to do, since I haven't called this number yet with a change appointment request, I'm just going to do that very quickly. All right, so I just quickly did a test call. Now you can see we have the variables to access. We have the original appointment date, which I said was October 8th at 3 p.m. The new appointment date, which is October 9th at 4 p.m. It got my name wrong. I probably should have clarified a bit more to say Cam Smith, but that's all good for testing purposes. So now within here, we can select our start date, which is going to be the original appointment date. So what this is going to do, it's going to search for anything that we have on this date if we just left it like this. But then what I like to do is add our query, and we're going to be searching for any events on this date that have our name. So I'm going to put in the name Cam Smith since it got it wrong in the actual call transcript. Then for event types, we can select all. And and we don't need to order it by anything. And what this is going to do, it's going to return all events that are on the specified date that we input and include this inside of the event. So if I go ahead and I run this module only, and I just put in the appointment date of October 8th at 2024, and then I put 3 p.m., it should pull back my appointment, and you can see that it did. We get back the event ID, which is what we need, and we have all of the information that was in our appointment. If I go to my calendar, it's this one here. Now, you technically don't have to put in the name as a query parameter if we're putting in the exact date and time, but let's say you have a calendar that has multiple appointments at the same time, then you want to make sure that you're searching for that person's name and that time, so you're not changing multiple people's bookings. So then what we can do is go ahead and update event module, and then for event ID, we want to go ahead and select map, and for here, we're going to select from the Google Calendar search events module, we want to click the event ID. This is going to make sure that whatever event that we find here, we go ahead and remap here. Then for the event name, I'm going to leave it blank so it carries over the same name as the previous one. Then for the start date, I'm going to go ahead and go into the extract appointments for the change module and select the new appointment date. Then again, we'll set the duration, which shouldn't change. Then we'll go back into advanced settings, add our description again, which is going to be our caller name, and then our phone number, and then the conversation notes. Then we'll add the attendees again, which will be the caller name and then the caller email. And everything else can be the same. We can notify all guests if we want to, and then we can hit save. So what this should do is actually find our event and then update it on our calendar. Now, I'm not going to run this and test this because I've already done this in the other scenario I've created. But at this point, when you're building these scenarios out for yourself, you want to test that every step of the way. So you could go ahead and trigger a call from Bland and make sure that this all works correctly. Next, let's jump into canceling our appointments, which is going to be very similar to the updating appointments. All right, now that we've set up our rescheduling functionality, setting up the cancels will be super quick and easy. So what we want to do is literally just shift and copy these two modules, and then we can paste them, and then we want to connect this over here. Now we don't have to change any of the prompting within this module for canceling. That's because we already get an original appointment date and a new appointment date. Now, like always, I just made a quick adjustment to the system prompt, and basically our output is we need to collect the appointment date that's to be canceled. And again, in the example output, we have appointment date canceled, caller name, caller email, service requested, conversation notes. The same kind of format. And again, you'll get the blueprint for the scenario so you can have all of the system prompts and everything set up. So we'll hit OK. And right now, these variables aren't colored in because we haven't run this module yet, but you can see that this is module number 9, and we are pulling number 9, so it copied over everything. Now for the query, since I hard coded that in, you'd want to change that to be the actual caller name variable, but I'm going to leave it for now just for testing purposes. You'd want to do the same here. And then instead of an update and event module, we're going to do a delete an event module. Again, we're going to select our calendar ID. We're going to map our event ID, which is going to be pulled from the previous Google Calendar search events module. Then we can hit OK. And all this is going to do is simply find the event and then cancel it. We don't have to set anything extra up. And basically the fundamentals of this whole automation are now set up. We can check calendar availability, we can book appointments, we can cancel appointments, and we can reschedule appointments. At this point, we want to go ahead and refine everything. So we add, maybe someone inquires about customer service, we forward that to an Airtable. Maybe we could forward all of these reschedules and cancels to an Airtable for organization. Then we'd want to go back into Bland and make sure we're capturing things like the service requested. Is it a teeth cleaning? Is it a regular checkup? And then we just want to refine the actual flow of the conversation. Now we're going to do that in future lessons, but right now you guys have all the tools that you need to be able to book appointments, to be able to make these advanced AI callers, and you know all the things that you need to do to be able to adapt these for your use case. Now I'm just going to quickly organize these. And now just to show you how the canceling works, I'm going to have Bland send me a call so we can show that this actually works. So right now I'm hitting send call, and I'm going to go ahead and cancel the teeth cleaning for October 8th.
Thanks for calling Durham Smiles. How can I help you today?
Yeah, I'd like to cancel an appointment that I had on the 8th.
Before I can assist with that, can you please tell me your name so I can locate your appointment in our system? And just to confirm, you're looking to cancel an appointment scheduled for the 8th. What time was that appointment for?
Yeah, my name is Cam Smith, and the appointment was for October 8th at 3 p.m.
I've located your appointment, Mr. Smith. Just to confirm, you have an appointment scheduled for October 8th at 3 p.m. and you'd like to cancel it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Your appointment for October 8th at 3 p.m. has been successfully canceled. Would you like to schedule a new appointment?
No, I'm all set.
Thanks for calling. Have a good evening.
Now we can check our webhook, and this should begin running. Here we're processing the call. We go down the cancel path. And now if I go back into my calendar, you can see that our appointment on the 8th isn't canceled. I also did a test run if you see that the 9th isn't there as well. Now we had to change one thing. We just had to go into our module and make sure that we change this start date to the appointment date canceled, because we did change our system prompts. But from there, it all works and the appointment gets canceled. The same thing would work for reschedules. It would find our existing appointment and then update the event. Now, if you wanted to do something where you confirm on the call that they actually have that appointment at that time, you could just duplicate the webhook functionality in Bland and basically route this confirm reschedule to a different check availability node. And I would just send a webhook and then do the exact find appointment that we do here to actually return and confirm that that person has that appointment booked at that date and time.